Minister Farrakhan, thank you so much.
I'm honored.
I am as well. I want to not waste any time with pleasantries, if that's all right.
Of course.
I remember as a student bringing you to the University of Toledo as Black Student Union president, hearing you speak, and how I knew young men and young women on that campus that day who became more involved, not just in campus activity, but in their community as a result of your words. And I think it was history repeating itself as you heard one day the Honorable Elijah Muhammad speak. And I was wondering, what was it that you heard him say that got not only into your intellect, but your spirit to change you?
He was a man that I had been looking for all my life. Growing up in the home that I grew up in, where my mother always was black conscious and being a very black woman herself in complexion, she didn't want her light-skinned child to grow up not loving black. So she brought me the Crisis magazine with the writings of W.E.B. Du Bois. She made sure that I kept up with what was happening in the South with the lynching and harming of our people in the Afro-American and the Pittsburgh Courier. So I always grew up with a longing for somebody who would deliver black people. So while I was in Sunday school, I asked my Sunday school teacher, well, look, you know, the Bible is full of prophets that came to deliver a people. When will God send us somebody to deliver us? Of course, my teacher could not answer. And it was when I was around 11, my uncle lived in New York, and I went to visit him, and on his mantelpiece was a picture of a black man, which was very strange, because my mother had a picture of Jesus, and he was Caucasian, and there was a picture of King George and Queen Elizabeth, because she was a British subject, being from the Caribbean. But this black man's face on the wall in my uncle's house, I asked him, who was that man? And he said, he's a man that came to unite black people. Well, I knew that that was the man that I wanted to be with. And being a shorty, in real terms, they took a chair, my uncle took a chair, and I stood on the chair to drink in the features of this man. And I asked what was his name and where could I go to meet him. And that man was the Honorable Marcus Garvey. And my uncle told me that he had passed away. And I began to weep because I had come so close to what I had been looking for. So when I heard Elijah Muhammad say the things that he said, and he looked to me to be the one that was for our people, I wasn't quite sure the first day I heard him, but my uncle came and said, your wife has already joined. What's wrong with you? So, not being disrespectful of my elders, I got up to join. But when I went to New York and heard Brother Malcolm, I was convinced beyond a shadow of a doubt that Elijah Muhammad was where I wanted to be. And I joined the mosque, and I never looked back. And I'm so grateful to God that he allowed me to believe in what the Honorable Elijah Muhammad taught, because it gave purpose, greater purpose to my life. And I live today to see the rise of our people here and throughout the world.
I ask you this not to cause further division between Christians and Muslims, because Lord knows any conversation we do have right now can't add any more to that. But I'm wondering, you came up Christian, raised in a Christian home. What was it that you heard was there a specific thing? Because I understand the methodology and even the theology,
Yes,
but what was the thing that sparked?
It was about blackness. You know, my Christian upbringing was wonderful, and I go back to the church that I grew up in and preach sometimes. I will never let division keep me away from my Christian family, because that's my root. But it didn't deal with the problem of black people and their suffering in America. I love Jesus, but to talk about Jesus and not the lynching, to talk about Jesus and not the Jim Crow, to talk about Jesus and not the segregation that took place in the church and the hypocrisy of the church, that bothered me. So when I heard Brother Malcolm and the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, I heard what I was looking for, somebody concerned with black people. And that's what I never heard in the church. And so I joined. But as I matured in the word of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and in the word of the Bible and Quran, I hate the division that sets the family of Abraham against each other, Jews, Christians, and Muslims. So I studied the Torah, I studied the Injil, and I studied the Quran to see where the strain of truth is that can bring the whole family of Abraham together. And that's what you heard Savior's Day in my lecture.
Staying along those lines and talking about you coming up, I think people know the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, the fiery and the inspirational, but many don't know the Honorable Louis Minister Farrakhan, the artist, the concert violinist, and in many cases even the playwright. When you look back at those times when, prior to joining the Nation of Islam, loving the violin, and even as you came into the Nation of Islam, understanding that your gift could be used there, what was it that as so many young people that watch this network and television shows all over the country, even those in college, carrying around demos in their backpack because they're more interested in getting a deal than a degree, want to be in this entertainment industry, you in many cases turned it down. With the love that you had for your art and the love that you had for performing, what was it that caused you to say, I'm not going to go in this direction, to go in another?
I was in the mosque maybe about 30 days. And Elijah Muhammad sent down a directive. You either get out of music or get out of the mosque. He didn't send it down to me personally, but he sent it down to all the musicians who were in nightclubs and bars playing and whatnot. Well, that was me. I was playing in Greenwich Village at the time at a place called the Village Barn, and I missed the lecture that day, and I came up to the restaurant to get a bowl of bean soup, and my brother dropped it on me. He said, man, Elijah Muhammad sent a message, man, that you got to get out of the mosque or get out of music. I got up from the table and I walked outside. I may have walked about 20, no more than 30 paces. And I made up my mind. I could live without music, but I couldn't live without truth. And so I decided I would give up my music right then. But I had 30 days till the end of December. So I was up in the Borscht circuit in the Catskill Mountains playing at the Neverly Country Club. And I decided, oh, what the heck, I might as well get it all out of my system. So I played jazz violin, classical violin, I sang ballads and light opera, then I told jokes, and I sang calypso, and I danced. And I was just getting it all out. When I went downstairs to change, a man came downstairs and said to me, he says, are you under management? I said, no, sir. He said, well, I'm the manager of Pearl Bailey and Billy Daniels. He said, if you would agree, He said, I will put you in the stable with them, that whatever supper club would take Billy Daniels and Pearl Bailey, I'll make them take you, and I'll start you off at $500 a week.
Which for that time was quite a bit.
That's in the 50s. So I thanked him. But I went home that night. I knew I wasn't going to take it, but we were supposed to meet downtown for dinner and sign a contract. That night I laid down, and God gave me a vision of 2 doors. One door had success over it and a mound of gold and diamonds that came up just about this high. And the other door had Islam over it with a black veil. And I was told to choose. And I chose the door of Islam, even though I knew that if I had pursued my music, I would have had a great future musically. Not knowing what the future was going to be Islamically, I chose Islam. Now, to close this question, which is a very profound question, when Jesus met Peter, he was already fishing.
Mm-hmm.
When Elijah Muhammad met me, I had audiences. In all the nightclubs in which I appeared, people lined up around the block to come in to see this young calypso singer, dancer, balladeer perform. But like Jesus said to Peter, he said to me, in other words, I'm going to make you a fisher of men. It was more important to me to draw people to the Word than by my personal charisma to draw people to me as an entertainer. Because I can entertain you musically and you'll feel good, but it won't change the way you think about yourself, about your people. It won't help you to discover your own purpose in life. So I made a conscious decision to give up my music. And of course, I wrote plays in the early days when I was under Brother Malcolm. I wrote songs that were racially conscious, but it got so popular, the mosques were filling up so, but the people were more interested in me because I was a musician and an entertainer rather than a serious teacher. So I played here in Chicago. We played at Carnegie Hall, we played at Town Hall. We played here in Chicago and was at the Dunbar High School. And Elijah Muhammad came in the theater in the second show. And then he invited me over to his house, which was next door at the time. And he pulled me close to him like you and I are sitting, and he put his hand on my thigh and he said, brother, you have a great musical talent. He says, but your spiritual side is greater even than your music. So I'm going to ask you to give it up and concentrate on the spiritual. It didn't take me no time. Yes, sir. I gave it up. Then in 1974, just as he's about to go, in this house, I bring my violin. After dinner, I play the violin for him. He looked up at me and said, brother, you really can play that thing. And a couple of weeks later, he called me on the telephone and said, I want you to come out Tuesday, and I want you to bring your violin. Nobody will be here but me and Sister Tynetta and her children. So just as the chairs are broken down now, they were all out here, and Ishmael and Rasul, Muhammad, they put on a little skit, and we were laughing and enjoying each other. And Mother Tynetta went to the piano and played, and then he says, well, why don't you play your violin? So I played, and after I played, he says, isn't that the same song you played for me the last time? I said, yes, sir. He said, well, don't you know anything new? And of course, I couldn't know anything new because I had stopped taking lessons, I had stopped practicing and whatnot. But later on, it dawned on me. The message of Islam is a universal message. It starts off nationalistic, and then it grows universally. Like the message of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, it started off with just the Arabs in Arabia, but then it spread to the ends of the earth at that time. Jesus started off telling his disciples, "Go ye not in the way of the Gentiles, nor even in the way of the Samaritans, but go ye to the lost sheep of the house of Israel." Very specific instructions, very narrow focus. But then at a certain time he said, "Go ye into all the world and preach this gospel to every nation, kindred, and tongue." You can't preach a universal gospel with a heart that's just focused on your people. So when he brought me back to the violin in music is so universal. He put me back in my music. In the closing stages of my life, now I'm working on an album. And I pray that God will bless me to finish it before this year is out. It's like a Ray Charles album surrounded by superstars. And my life story is told in music with artists, and my playing classical, my playing jazz, my singing ballads, calypsos. But everything has meaning this time around. And so my heart now is expanded. I can say that the black masses of America and the world are the cornerstone of my work and my life. But I feel the pain of Hispanic people. I feel the pain of the Palestinians. I feel the pain of all those who suffer oppression in the world. So now my voice is not just a voice for black people. We're the cornerstone of it, but my voice now is a voice for humanity.
You talk a lot about your evolution, and I'm curious because I hear you say how much it meant, the example of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and the words of Brother Malcolm in converting, in many cases, you from one path to something totally different, sacrificing in many cases what the world would have said was yours. What was it in 1976, 76, that would cause you to leave the nation after all that transformation?
Well,
after all that sacrifice?
I tried my best to work with the new direction of Imam W.D. Muhammad. I've loved him from the time we were little youngsters together, but I didn't completely agree with the direction. He said, "Well, preach what you agree with." And I said, "But if I preach what I agree with, some of what I disagree with will come out, and it will have a tendency to divide an already divided community." So I decided to leave the mosque and go back into show business. And at that time, Godfrey Cambridge, the former comedian, died in California, and I was asked to come and participate in his funeral. I was on my way to California at the time, so Brock Peters, you may know of him, a great black actor who recently passed away. I went to his home and we did the funeral of Godfrey Cambridge, and so many Hollywood personalities were there. And they had a chance to experience Farrakhan. But when I got back to the house for the repast, the brother who wrote the book Fire Next Time, James Baldwin, was there, and Maya Angelou and others. And I said I wanted to get the Arab world to give me some money because I wanted to do the life of Brother Malcolm. I wanted to play his life in a movie because I felt I had walked right up in his shoes, so I could do it. And James Baldwin said, "Well, I wrote the screenplay." And he said, "I'll send it to you, brother." And he sent it to me. And it was titled One Day When I Was Lost. He was living in southern France at the time, and I was on my way to Egypt. And so he was going to come over from southern France to Cairo, and we would discuss the book and the play, because there were certain things in it that I couldn't do. Like Brother Malcolm had a romance with a Caucasian, and I couldn't play that role in the movie because it went against my principles. So I wondered if we could doctor the book some. But in between that time, I went to Libya, I went to Uganda, and Idi Amin called Muammar Gaddafi, told him, I have a very interesting man here. He has a project in mind that I think you'd be interested in. And he flew me to Tripoli. And when I got there, unfortunately, the time that I was to meet with Brother Gaddafi was in Benghazi. And the plane that I was to go to him on, my Ghanaian driver said, don't worry, they're always late. And we missed that flight. And the Libyans laughed, at my wanting to make a movie on the life of Malcolm. And then I went to the holy city of Mecca in Arabia. And I was trying to see if they would raise money or help me give money so we could do the film. And they turned it down because of cultural reasons. But while I was in Mecca, I slowly began to think of the nation, the condition of the followers, and I decided I'm going to try to rebuild Elijah Muhammad's work. And when I came back from Mecca, I met a brother and we started. But that's my evolution.
But let me ask you, because I think that to say you started, you found a brother and started, I think in the context of many people who may be watching, makes sense. You came back after a great deal of travel, after knowing that you had sacrificed so much, but I don't think that it accurately describes how much more was there. Because you're saying to me that after you've been gone, you come back to start something in the vision that many followers had shifted gears to do something else.
That's correct.
What gave you the gumption to say that I have the ability?
I never said that because I doubted my own ability. But I loved the Honorable Elijah Muhammad so much, and I loved the community so much, I thought at least, since his name was being written out of history, that I should do something. Because a man that great who did that much should never be written out of history. There wouldn't have been a Malcolm X if there were no Elijah. There wouldn't have been a Muhammad Ali if there were no Elijah. There wouldn't have been an Imam Muhammad if there were no Elijah. And there wouldn't be any Farrakhan if there were not Elijah. So the media takes the students and lifts the students and compares the students and tries to make the students greater than the teacher. I am unworthy to unlace his shoes. No matter what I do, his inspiration is what has guided me all of these years. And if it were not for my love for him and my desire not to see him written out of history, because he's the man that white folks most feared. They didn't fear Malcolm, especially when he left Elijah. And they didn't fear the change of direction of the nation. They feared the idea of Elijah Muhammad. In fact, if I may say this, I was on the island of Jamaica when Brock Peters was doing a movie called Lost in the Stars, and I had just appeared on national television with Tony Brown on Black Journal. And they were highlighting parts of my speech before the Congress of African People in Atlanta. And the person who was the producer of the film, when Brock told him that I was on the island, he wanted to meet me. So when I came to the set to meet him during their lunch break, he said these words to me: "You seem like a nice guy, Farrakhan. It's not you that we fear. It's your ideas." Nothing is more powerful than an idea whose time has come. So if we have an idea that undercuts white supremacy, that undercuts a social, political, economic, religious system that has suppressed and oppressed the masses of dark people all over the world and white people themselves too, then that idea must be crushed. You can kill the man, but if his idea lives, he lives. So Garvey, when he was deported, the whole idea of Garvey back to Africa, that was struck. Martin Luther King was more than I have a dream. Martin Luther King was a brilliant, brilliant oratorical genius. And what Martin Luther King was when he was assassinated, he was coming to grips with America and the world problem and the war. So what do? You take a man great like that and you don't allow people to get into the body of knowledge that Martin Luther King represented. Who's reading Martin Luther King's words? All you're reading is, I have a dream. But that man was more than that. What about Brother Malcolm? You say, well, by any means necessary. Well, what does that mean? You can't sloganize a man that has that kind of knowledge that he put before Black America and white America. But how much of Malcolm do you really know? Very little.
But I think that's interesting because I'm asking the same question about you. And I continue to be honored by your humility. But I'm thinking about that time when you decide to say to yourself, before saying to anyone else, that we're going to get this going again. And the fact that in the 1970s, they were haters just like they are in 2007. And so what did the haters say? The people that said, Farrakhan, this isn't going to happen.
My life was in danger. But there's no movement that starts where the persons that give life to movement are not in some kind of danger. If it were not for God, I would not be here today. There were many, pardon me, that wanted to take my life. And I'm just lucky to be here. But when you have a purpose for your life, you don't think about consequences. You think about doing what it is that God put you here to do. And so even though my life was threatened, and certainly there was some concern on my part and my family's part about my being killed, God was merciful to me and protected me, and young men and women, as I said, Savior's Day, came around me to give their life to preserve my life. And I was just fortunate that I've guided them in a way that none of them have lost their lives trying to protect me and mine.
The evolution of Minister Farrakhan has had several points that I don't know if you ever will be able to shake. The kind of questions that people continue to ask no matter how much time passes. And one of those obviously is about Brother Malcolm. And I've heard stories and interviews where I think you've even admitted to being engaged in helping to create the environment through some of your writings and some cartoons. But how do you feel as you enter into the final third of your life?
Oh, thank you. Well,
about the fact that people continue to ask that question, because I don't really want you to answer the question, were you involved? Because I'm more concerned with the.
I was not involved, but you know, if you go back in time, when Brother Malcolm was assassinated, New York had 11 daily newspapers. All up from that time to the 1980s, you couldn't read any periodical that mentioned Louis Farrakhan in connection with Brother Malcolm's assassination. But when I arose And 19,000 people came out in Los Angeles, and nearly 50,000 couldn't even get into the Madison Square Garden and the other arena that holds 6,000. We packed that place out in the midst of controversy, where people were saying, who do you want, Farrakhan? How do you want him? Dead. Well, Farrakhan was emerging now as a voice for black people. When I left Madison Square Garden, some of the papers were calling Farrakhan the premier leader among black people, because no other black person was drawing those kinds of crowds. Well, how does the enemy react to that? Since they had no living person to put against me that could amount to a real, I would say, aversion to the minister, then they raised my brother from the dead. Do you know that when Brother Malcolm was assassinated, the papers rejoiced at his death? Go back and read. Do you know that Brother Malcolm, in 1965, when he was assassinated, was called by the Anti-Defamation League the leading black anti-Semite? Do you know that it was Brother Malcolm who exposed the real powers behind the NAACP and the civil rights movement? Do you know that it was Brother Malcolm who put on our reading list the protocols of the learned elders of Zion? Brother Malcolm was no fool. If Brother Malcolm could come back today and see himself on a stamp, a U.S. government stamp, he wonder what happened. Because he did not like the U.S. government. You know his speech, if you know his speech.
Yes.
I was with him all during that time. When I split with Brother Malcolm was when he split with Elijah Muhammad. Elijah Muhammad was always my man. I loved Brother Malcolm because he was Elijah Muhammad's greatest helper. So when he split from Elijah Muhammad and I split from him, he began attacking the moral character of his teacher. Well, I'm a follower of Elijah Muhammad. I wrote in the paper and defended the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. And when they started bringing Brother Malcolm up, Mr. X, and then made a movie on his life, but the real movie was to damn the image of Elijah Muhammad and the Nation of Islam. And to bring Brother Malcolm back was to really say to the young black people who this man became a hero to, Farrakhan killed him. So that some young black man with a gun in his hand would think that they're doing God a favor by killing Louis Farrakhan. The aim of the enemy has never changed. They don't love Malcolm today. They didn't love him then. But they'll choose a dead Malcolm over a live Farrakhan. To make Louis Farrakhan a party to the murder. It's true, when I wrote critical of Brother Malcolm, that an atmosphere was being created. Out of that atmosphere, he was assassinated. But it was Brother Malcolm himself who started that atmosphere by the charges that he made against his teacher, which we were bound to defend. And in defending, there's charges, there's counter charges, and who benefits? FBI sitting back, the enemy sitting back. Now we got them fighting and killing each other. And that's what they would like to do today.
Well, and what has been the difference? I mean, if we look at that environment, or whether we look at the United Slaves and the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense and Brother Karanga and Brother Bobby and others.
It was the U.S. government and the counterintelligence program of J. Edgar Hoover.
Absolutely. But here's my question, because many young people don't know about COINTELPRO, the counterintelligence program, and don't know about the FBI's role. But I guess my question to you, in being an elder at this point, is as we see these kind of things play out, even at the local level, with young people on the block who kill their own brothers and their own sisters, as a result of innuendo and rumor that's cast out, what would you say to the community about how you would handle that situation differently as a result of what you've been able to see in your life?
Well, naturally, with time, you should grow wiser. If Malcolm had been alive today and Martin had been alive today, we would probably be in a much better position and condition. But God is the best knower, and we lost Malcolm and we lost Martin. And here we are. But we're a long ways from where we were in the 60s, when the Honorable Elijah Muhammad changed the language from Negro to black. I'm light-skinned, but I'm a black man. Then I was in league and in sympathy with black people, not only in America, but in the Caribbean, in Central and South America, in Africa, in the Isles of the Pacific. I saw them as my brother and my sister. So the language at that time was, how you doing, brother? Mm-hmm. How you doing, sister? 30 years later, what's the language? Yo, dog, what's up, dog? And then the N-word. See, Elijah Muhammad struck the N-word from the vocabulary of all Muslims. We never use that kind of language to describe your brother, because if you use that kind of language, that tells you what you think of your brother. So look at the condition of our community today. We weren't killing each other wholesale then like we're doing now. And it's because we don't have a mind that that's my brother, that's my sister. No, you not in my gang, you not using the right color, you not giving the right sign, you live on the wrong side of the tracks, then you are my enemy. So the enemy has won that phase of the battle, and we have lost. And the thing that you just said was, the young people don't know about the counterintelligence program. Why don't they know? Young people today don't know what their grandfathers, their great-grandfathers, and their great-great-grandfathers went through to bring us to where we are today. My own granddaughter, when we were in Detroit, went to the museum, the Charles Wright Museum of African History, and she saw the beauty of Africa and then the fall of her ancestors in slavery. And she was crying all the way through it and came home to me and said, Grandpa, I didn't know that we went through something as deep as that. Well, there's the story. If these young people don't know what their grandparents went through, what their parents went through, what we came through to get to this juncture, how then can there ever be continuity in struggle? Harry Belafonte was at Howard University, and he came back and he said to me, Brother Farrakhan, the children do not know their recent history, much less the history of slavery. And so we're at a loss now. So we've got to turn all the way back around. If we want to win this generation, we have to go back in the schools and teach them about themselves so they'll have a healthy respect for themselves. And when they look across the aisle, they see a black brother, a black sister. She may not be in their neighborhood. She may not wear the same color, but she is their color. We got to change the language back. The enemy was so smart. Black Journal became Tony's Journal. Black News in New York was gone. Black Star program in Baltimore. Black programs in Chicago. Everyone with a black adjective describing the noun was taken off the television. So the talk of black was replaced with change of language. Minority. Disadvantage.
Multicultural.
Oh, please. So once you change the person's language, you change the way they think. And if you look at our young people today, you can tell that we're sick because there's no continuity in our struggle. Some of these young people think we've already made it because they can marry a white man or a white woman.
But even the Bible says, raise a child in the way that he should go, so that when he grows old, he won't depart from it.
That's where we failed. We did not raise our children in the way that they should go. We got lost with integration. We could go to a white restaurant now. We could go to a white hotel, a white motel. We could hobnob with white people. We could marry white women. White men can marry black women. Everything is hunky-dory now. We've come past that. And some white people today, when you talk about reparations, when you talk about the price of slavery, they say, get over it. Get over it. They will never tell a Jewish child that talks about the Holocaust, get over it. But they got the nerve to tell you and me, get over it.
But let me
Hell no, we'll never get over this until justice comes to the black man and woman who have suffered injustice all these years.
I want you to stay there, because I've heard you be very critical of the fact that in many cases the Jewish community controls the imagery that's put out over television waves, motion picture, music of black artists and black actors, so on and so forth, where in many cases we can have black movies that will talk about, in a comical way, figures within African American history, but you would never see that happen with a Jewish historical figure. Do you think that this is obviously by design? And if so, what can our communities begin to do to have greater institutional control over the images that are cast out of us?
Well, if it's not by design, it certainly looks that way. When Michael Jackson, I think on his History album, talked about do me, Jew me, like me, kike me, they made him take every one of those albums off the shelf and change the language. Because they didn't want Michael, with his fame and love of, the people love him all over the world, to use language that would even suggest possible anti-Semitism. I've heard black rappers in meetings with me say that they've gone to record executives with conscious rap, and the record executives would say to them, this won't sell. So you either go home and call a black woman out of her name, or use the foul language, call each other dog, call each other the N-word. That sells. Who made it sell? Public Enemy didn't start like that. The conscious rappers were taken over by another kind of rap that began to be promoted, and conscious rap almost died. The rapper is the leader of young people all over the world. They're leading them today in one way, but with wisdom, they'll lead the youth in a much better way.
Well, and I was at the first hip-hop summit that Russell had, that he invited you to, and I don't want people to think that that was the first time you engaged the hip-hop community. You were invited because you had been engaging the hip-hop community. But at that event, which was themed Taking Back Responsibility, you gave harsh words to a number of artists, the artist community, about their ability and capacity to be able to lead. 6 years later, do you feel like much has changed? And do you believe that these artists in 2007 not have the capacity, but have the desire to lead?
They have the capacity to lead. I don't think they have the desire to lead. It's something forced upon them because millions of people buy their records. But to change the language of your rap, since the children are listening more to rappers than they listen to their teachers, then the rapper could become their teacher in a much more profound way than the rapper is doing. I don't like to knock rappers. I love them. And I see their greatness beyond themselves. And I'm always trying to pull on what I know is in them, but there are forces that don't want to see us change. So how do we stop it? A collective action on our part against the executives. And then when we get to the point where we don't want to use the N-word anymore, and we understand the meaning of it, and we understand what it's saying about our psychology or our psyche, then you stop buying albums that low-rate your people. You stop supporting the caricatures of black people on Fox or other TV stations that write these little stupid comedies where you are just like Stepin Fetchit in the 1990s and 2000s. We're going backwards in time because our God has become money. So all the enemy has to do is give you a good paycheck, and then you compromise principle over money. And that's why Jesus said you can't serve God and mammon too. No man can serve two masters. You love one and you hate the other. If you hate the way your people are being destroyed, then you must love a way that will help you lift your people from their destroyed state.
But let me ask you this, because I sometimes have a problem with the notion that artists should be held responsible to be leaders. If they do, that's great. But what makes us believe, as critically thinking people, that going platinum gives me the intellectual capacity to mentor somebody? When this is the first time in the history of our people when artists have been given this responsibility. If we look at the past, if we look at the Sidney Poitiers and the Ozzie Davis and Ruby Dees and the Sonia Sanchez's and others that were around during the 60s, who subscribed to black nationalism or subscribed to the civil rights methodology and ideology. They were engaged in a movement, but they didn't lead it. Are we now asking artists and entertainers to lead in lieu of a void of real leadership in our community?
That's a very good question, because they didn't lead because real leaders were leading.
Right.
Today there's a vacuum, and nature abhors a vacuum. So the young people have stepped in. If you can teach a young boy to go out and sell some drugs, you can teach him how to sell products that are legitimate. It's just how you teach your baby what to do. Now here's a rapper. He ain't trying to be a leader, he's trying to make some money. But all of a sudden, 1 million people have bought his album. He's shocked. He's blown completely away. And everywhere he turns, little people, young people quoting him. He comes out on the stage to rap, and everybody in the audience is rapping right with him. They know that, but they don't know any lessons in school. They don't know what's going on in the world around them. So now the rapper has become the mama, the papa. The rapper has become the leader by de facto leader. Leading by default, because there's a failure of preachers to reach the young. So now we got hip hop in the church, we got, jazz, we got all kind of stuff going down. So the people rocking on Sunday like they rock on Saturday night in the club. So we're trying to get young people back in the church, young people back in this, but young people are listening more to a rapper than they do to one of the greatest preachers, and that's T.D. Jakes. All of these great preachers, Louis Farrakhan. The young people hear me, but they don't dance. And that's a heck of a thing, man. You pipe into somebody and they don't want to dance, but our young people hear Farrakhan. That's nice, man. The man is show, oh boy, he's something else, man. But they don't dance to the rhythm of the truth. So there's a chastisement coming. That's what I meant on Sunday when I said my time is up. It's not that my time is up to stand in front of our people and talk to them, But the Honorable Elijah Muhammad was a bearer of good news and a warner. Every time a black person comes, male or female, and lifts our people, the minute they're gone, the enemy touches the snooze button, and we just drop on back to sleep, waiting for the next person to entertain us with knowledge. Knowledge is not entertainment. Once you are the recipient of knowledge, you have a responsibility to act on the principles of that knowledge, or the knowledge will be a means of your own destruction. It's not that our people don't know. They know better. But now it's a time when, I'm gonna smoke my crack, I'm gonna do my drugs, and yo dog, yo N-word, yo B-word. And this is hip because I can bling bling off of that. Mm-hmm. I can wear so many diamonds, I got them all in my teeth. I got them on a cross in front of me, mocking Jesus. Because Jesus is appalled at the language we use to describe one another. Yet when we take our Emmy or our Grammy, we say, I'm thanking my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Did he save you from the madness that projected you into the limelight, and you want to stay being mad because it brings you money? How long will it take for you to be hot as a rapper? You hot today, gone tomorrow. You don't have any longevity. And what happens to the person that hits the lottery? They get money so fast, it kills them.
But let me ask you this, because I've seen you engage artists, and I know about meetings that have happened that never reached the press. Violence that was curtailed as a result of you having sit-downs with individual artists in their camps to calm beefs. But where have your contemporaries been? Where have those that have been quick to condemn their own children for the language that they use and the behavior that they're engaged in? Because you and I both know that even though Shorty on the block may not listen, the artist will if you come, if Jesse comes, if Sharpton comes, if others come. But in many cases, I've only seen you come. And so what about your contemporaries who have had the capacity to mentor these artists, who have the ability to reach the masses, but have only been engaged in condemnation?
Well, first, what is the spirit out of which the condemnation comes? I watched a sister that lives in Philadelphia that passed away maybe 2 years now. I'm sorry, her name escapes me. But she was the first one to condemn, not the first, but
C. Dolores Tucker.
Thank you. She condemned the artist for their language,
yes,
but not out of a spirit of hate. She's a mother. And just like your mama would take you aside and put that switch on your backside and then send you back out to play, C. Dolores Tucker was like a mother saying to her children, look, this is unacceptable. We've come too far for you to do this to your sister, to your brother. But it appeared like a mean-spirited condemnation. She went to the record executives and blasted them. Mm-hmm. She's a mother. We are her children. She wants to see her children better. Bill Cosby. Bill Cosby was speaking in a black environment, and his words were taken out of a black environment to the national environment, and it looks like Bill Cosby now, who is had the father image on the Cosby Show, is now talking down to his people. He's talking to the reality of a condition that he wants to raise us from. Maybe he didn't do it in the best manner, but his spirit was not a spirit of hatred for our people. I'm in love with black people. I don't care how you present yourself. I'm in love with you. Whether you gay, you straight, you this, you that, I know that there's an essence in black people that if you touch it right and bring it forward, that same black man that's doing what he's doing today will do something greater tomorrow. Malcolm is one of the best examples that he went all the way down to selling our women and selling drugs and pimping and robbing. But when he got a message that touched deep inside of him, Malcolm the pimp became Malcolm the professor, the teacher, the leader. And that's what's sitting up in these rappers. Now, if you look at 50 Cent, who is hot today, Kanye West, these young men have millions of people in the palm of their hands. I don't want to see us condemn them. I want to see us teach them, encourage them, enlighten them, and encourage them to do better because the whole world is listening. You go to Africa, it's rap. You go into the Islamic world where they hate Western culture. The young may be hiding it under the bed or somewhere, but they're listening to rap artists. So to me, that says to the young rapper, look, man, you didn't want to be no leader, but you got millions that are hanging on every word you say. Why don't you become a teacher of them? I can give you wisdom, put it in rap language. Jesse could give you knowledge, and you put it in rap language and start instructing your people. But then the record executives would say, we don't want that. So let's set up our own distribution companies. We have to distribute something better to our people because as a man thinks, Jesus said, so is he. You are what you eat. So if you're eating filth, you can't have a clean system. And if you're eating filth in your head day in and day out, you can't come out with clean language and clean actions if that's what you're feeding on. So Mao Zedong, to me, one of the greatest revolutionaries of our time, he had 1 billion people to convert to his idea. What did he do? He saw the value of the cultural community. So he took his ideas, or they took his ideas, put it in song, put it in dance, put it in plays, put it in books, and before you know it, China became a great, great nation. We'll never become a great nation without our artists. Our artists are the key, not only to the liberation of black people, but the liberation of humanity itself.
And that was why I'm sure that during the Million Man March, you included artists in many cases at a time when other people would not in that kind of forum. And as I look back, and not just at the Million More movement, but as I look back at the Million Man March, going myself as a college student and remembering being on the turnpikes and how trucks couldn't get in because there were so many buses. Let me ask, how did you feel on that day?
Honestly?
Yes.
Numb. You know, some people would think it would be great elation. But I'm a vessel that was used by a higher power to make that call and to do that work at that time that brought about that result. I'm gratified, but I learned more about the Million Man March from those who went because they saw it, they felt it, they got so much from it. I just came out after working for 2 years to produce it. I came out and delivered a message, but I was numb. Look out there and you can see it's more than 1 million people. God used me in a magnificent way, but some asked me, well, how do you feel? I felt like a leaf that a wind had carried here and carried there and carried there. I can't take any credit, none whatsoever. All the credit belongs to God. All the honor and the glory belongs to God. I'm just an instrument, and I'm so thankful that God would see fit to use me as an instrument.
As Moses was an instrument, Moses also became frustrated when the people did not catch the vision and manifest it in their own lives. Does Minister Farrakhan ever get frustrated?
Yes.
10 years, 15 years later when...
But I'm not tired. I'm hurting because I know what's coming.
But what frustrates you?
The fact that Elijah Muhammad said to me, it's going to take more than teaching to straighten our people up. I'm a teacher. I'm like a mother. When a mother has wayward children, and she's talking to them and talking to them and talking to them, and she even spanks them, but her spanking, it doesn't quite touch them in the right way to make them change. Then one day, out of frustration, she turns them over to Daddy. Daddy ain't talking. When Daddy starts whipping that backside, the child cries, I ain't gonna do it no more. He said he knows. You're not gonna do it no more, but I'm gonna keep doing this until I make the message that your mother said to you sink deep in. In the 33rd chapter of Ezekiel, they saw the prophet Ezekiel as a beautiful song. And when they couldn't hear the song anymore, you know what they said? Indeed, a prophet of God was among us. How do you all see Farrakhan? You see him as a lovely song. I love to go hear the brother. The brother can rap. The brother's this. The brother's that. But I know there's an end to the final call. I know that when the train says, final call, leaving on track 22, well, final call, gate 6. If you don't get there in time, it leaves you. Well, right now, black people are in a dangerous position because the God is angry with us. Angry because we know better, but we refuse to do better. A warner came among us and told us, get up from the foot of the enemy and stop begging them for what you could unite and do for yourself. And you still out here looking to them to provide a future for you when the future is in your own hands. And then you turn on yourself and kill yourself and kill each other. No, the God is angry, and we're going to pay a price for that. My days of warning us about what God is about to do is just about over. Not that my time to lead is over. My time to warn you of what God is about to put on our behind is up. And you're about to reap the chastisement that you richly deserve because you know better and you won't do better, so you gotta feel. That's what my mother told me. A hard head make a soft behind. Well, your behind, not you, but our people's behind is gonna be like soft putty when God get finished. And the very people that you diss God for is going to turn on you, and you'll be slaughtered in the streets of the ghetto. Mark my words, brother, because I'm not warning you much longer. I'm telling you what you're going to face. And America is in the soup as we speak. She's going down, brother. And if we hang on to a ship that's sinking, man, you go down with the ship. You got to change. We've got to change. There's no playing for us anymore. It's all over. Bush has led this country to its near complete destruction. And if he goes a step further and gets into greater war that you can't win, then I feel sorry for you who think that you can be all that you can never be by joining the armed forces.
Well, let's pause. There are a couple things. One is that I think I've heard you say, and I'm not quoting you, but paraphrasing, that white folks often give themselves over to evil and animalistic behavior connected to this white supremacy that we find ourselves in the midst of. I'm wondering, in the midst of your journey and all that you've seen, in believing that, how do you respond to the animalistic and evil behavior that we give ourselves over to?
Any human being is capable of animalistic behavior because we start like animals and we grow into humans. And if we're successful in our spiritual growth, we become reflections of the divine. What has happened to black people is a lack of justice. And the Honorable Elijah Muhammad said to me that the star that is in the heavens that justify a worship of God, whenever justice is missing in our lives, the balance is lost. Mental balance is lost. And when a human being is deprived of justice and deprived of the proper courts or system for the redress of grievance, then the human being becomes not only savage, but beastly in our actions. The Bible says that the beast had put his mark in the forehead and in the hands of the people of God. And if you look at our community today, the mark of the beast is in our forehead. It's the way we think. The murder rate in the inner cities of America and even in suburbs is horrendous. The things that we do to each other without even a thought of feeling sad over this. 10-year-olds, 11-year-olds squeezing a trigger, putting a cap in somebody and killing them, and going into the burger counter and eating a burger after just slaughtering their brother. That's a beast in human form. That's a savage that has lost the knowledge of self and is living the life of a beast. We can't continue to blame the white man. We have to accept responsibility for our actions. And when knowledge is present, we hear it and act as though we didn't hear it and continue this downward spiraling in our conduct, where we're doing things to each other today that never was done even during the darkest hours and days of slavery. There's a price we have to pay for this behavior. And as I've warned our people, as you see the Palestinians with their AK-47s, but the Israelis come in with helicopter gunships, and they go into the West Bank and kick down the doors and kill who they wish to kill. That's going to happen in the inner cities of America. America is training her soldiers right now in Fort Hood, Texas, and in other places to kick down doors in the inner city, to find the guns that are there, to find the AK-47s that are there, the little arsenals that we have that make us think we're powerful. And helicopter gunships come down on our community with those kind of powerful machine guns. Don't you think that what you see over there, you're not going to see it over here. You're going to know that the people that killed our fathers are present in their children. And there's some of them that have no mercy for us. Right now, in the police force, you have that Ku Klux Klan mentality existing. And so, either we clean up our act, and we don't have a lot of time. Either the preachers get up in the pulpit and don't preach to the choir. Let's get out in the streets and get to our people. Let's sit down and talk with our rappers and help them to see that we can make a better people and we need their help. Don't condemn them, teach them. Don't condemn them, reform their thinking. We're in bad shape, my brother. But as a man soweth, the same shall he also reap. And that's why Jesus told Peter, sheathe your sword, because those who live by the sword will die by it. I'm fearful for our people's future. But I know we'll be all right, but after Daddy gets finished whipping that backside.
And that, I think, is a good segue to my last question. And it was almost 2 years ago exactly that you gave me the opportunity to talk to you. And I heard you say in great detail about the Mormons. You talked about the Mormons. You talked about who knows who the leader of the Mormons is. They're in Utah making money, doing business. But if the leader dies, yes, if the leader dies, they continue because no one's focused on who the leader is. As you have already said admittedly that you've seen the brink of death and come back, you know that whether you're gone next month or whether you live another 30 years, that death is imminent.
That's correct.
When you think about your legacy, what Minister Farrakhan has left the world as a vessel, as someone that was used, do you ever wonder if the very legacy that is you actually has been one of the greatest detriments, in that it's the imagery of Minister Farrakhan that has inspired so many people? It is the image and the work of Minister Farrakhan that has led the nation. And when that image is gone, will it continue? What will be the legacy that you leave, and what are you most concerned about your legacy?
I would like to address first the fact that the father of the Mormon faith was charismatic. They outgrew charisma and became wedded to the principles that made him so magnetic. Jesus was charismatic, but he was rooted in divine principles that Peter and Paul and James and John took up. So even though Jesus in his person was gone, Jesus in his principle was yet alive. And so any man that's worth anything that comes into leadership has to be concerned about his mortality and has to be concerned about what he's going to leave after he's gone. That question can only be answered by time. I've done my best to teach a lot of young men and women. The thing that I want to make sure of is the idea of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad so deeply ingrained in you that you will continue to carry on his legacy. The principles that he taught, that he lives in you as he lives in me, then the future is safe. But that will be told by time. Now, as far as my legacy is concerned, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad said these words to me. He said, as long as I live, I'm writing my testament. When death comes, it puts a period to my writing. Then the historians come and gather up all the bits and pieces of what my life is and assign me my place in history. I was in the home of a Jewish rabbi. We were talking about improved relationships. And one of the things that he told me was anyone that was not a friend of the Jewish people was never looked on kindly in history. Why? Because they write the history. So we have to become the historians, to write about Martin and Malcolm and to write about the great ones that walked among us. Don't let other people tell our story, because some people have a vested interest in burying Elijah Muhammad. And some people will have a vested interest in burying Louis Farrakhan. But if they are successful in doing that, it's because we have failed in the continuity of struggle. But I am as sure as I am that we are sitting here together, Brother Jeff, that the historians, when they write my history, if they feel I'm worthy, they'll assign me my proper place in history. Some people concern themselves about their legacy and do things to enhance their legacy. That's nothing but vanity. The prophets are not concerned about their legacy. They're concerned about doing the will of God and let history write them. And I believe that the right historians will write my history, and the wrong ones will try. But as when you turn on the light, the darkness flees. Falsehood will flee before the presence of truth. I want you to know, Brother Jeff, I enjoyed every question. And I'm happy over your intelligence. And I pray that BET will become a greater feeder of our young people's minds. They love to dance. They love to have a good time. We have to find ways to make a good time really good and get our young people inspired to be as great as they have the capacity to be. And as long as you are present, Jeff, I believe that will happen. May God bless you, and may God bless BET to serve the needs, the interests, and the good of its listenership and viewership. Thank you.
Bless you. On my way here, my son, who's 4 years old, said, "You're going to see the man that speaks truth." I said, "I am." That to me was more profound, because I never said to him this was the man that says truth. He was responding to the reaction of the people that he saw see you. I just want to say thank you.
Thank you
for being a man that speaks truth and that lives truth. Thank you for BET News, but thank you for me, a brother that you have inspired. I remember being a college student, understanding that you were one of the few people that came on the yard that inspired black students to be proud of who they were, regardless of what they heard in the classroom. And that even as black students like myself had death threats as a result of bringing you, that we understood that that was as a result of what you had to give to the people. And so I know that you've been a willing vessel that has made yourself open to be used. I want to thank you for that, because it's the very sacrifice that you don't know about, the lives that you've changed, the people that will never have the opportunity to hold your hand. I'm thanking you on behalf of them.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff.